Good morning, 10th grade. Welcome back from spring break. I'm glad to be back here with you. Um, we are going to tackle the Second World War today. We're starting a new chapter, chapter 22. Please note that I will be posting the PowerPoint as a whole section on our Google Classroom, so you'll be able to get that and have access to that separate from these videos. But I do want you to take these notes by hand. You know, even if you write down all the PowerPoint ahead of time and then just add in extra stuff as I talk through it in the videos, that's probably the best way to do this, just because that way you'll have the answers in front of you when it comes time to take the quiz. When you do your quiz after this video, you may use handwritten notes that you've taken during the video. It will help you. There's a lot of information in here on the Second World War. It's just a lot going on, a lot of different countries that can get mixed up in your head. So use your notes. I highly recommend it. Okay, so we're going to start off today talking about Japan. We're going to talk a little bit about China and Japan and Italy. And tomorrow we're going to spend most of the day going through Germany and how these countries are leading into World War II. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at Japan. Japan had been ruled by a family. It had I forget what the term is. It had an empire through centuries and centuries of their existence, but the Meiji Empire had been the most recent, and it had been overthrown, and they now had a civilian leadership after World War I. Emperor Hirohito was the main person in charge, and he had actually used the military to seize control of the government. The office of emperor had been everybody did anything the emperor said. He'd been the one in charge and all of that. But it had become largely ceremonial after World War I, where the civilians were in charge and the emperor was just a figurehead, kind of like the Queen of England today. But Hirohito changed that, and he seized control of the government he got control of the military first, and then used that to take control of the government. His real goal was to expand Japan. Remember, Japan is a very small, locked into just an island or a group of islands. They didn't have a whole lot of space for their growing population, so he needed more space. He also needed more natural resources. Japan is not known for its richness of natural resources. They have very little supply of anything, especially petroleum, so they had to find it elsewhere. So that was what he was hoping to do. And he was hoping to do that by taking over countries nearby. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look to their nearest and dearest neighbor, China. China has been experiencing some big problems at this point in their history. They lacked a strong central government. They'd had one in the past, but at this point that you're talking the 19-teens, 1920s, their government they've had a lot of political turmoil, and they don't have a strong central government. Sun Yat-sen had actually gotten in control of a group he called the Kuomintang, which is a nationalist party trying to establish a government in China. But they weren't able to establish a lot of good, solid control. And this had led to local groups in anarchy. Group over here overthrowing their local government, and a group over here overthrowing their local government, and just complete chaos. When Sun Yat-sen died, Chiang Kai-shek took control, and I'm probably saying these names wrong, but I'm doing the best I can, so I'm sorry if I'm wrong. Chiang Kai-shek took control, and he tried to reunite China and have a strong national government in the middle, just really being in firm control. But he was fighting against Mao Zedong to do so. Mao Zedong. Um, Mao Zedong was controlling the communist forces. He wanted to establish a communist government in China. Chiang Kai-shek wanted to establish a nationalist government in China. So they were fighting each other in basically a civil war in the late 1920s, early 1930s for control of China. I'm not going to go into the Long March. So anyway, Japan sees this as an opportunity to expand. China is having trouble with forming a government, so obviously they need us to step in and take control. So the Japanese do that. They seize, first of all, they go in and they seize all of Manchuria. And when they do that, the Chinese cry out to the League of Nations saying, hey, look, you got to come help us. We didn't ask for this. And the League of Nations says, no, China, no, Japan, you're not supposed to do that. And that's about all they do. They just, they tell them, no, you can't do that. Well, that angers the Japanese enough that they withdraw from the League of Nations and they say, we're not going to be a part of it anymore. And they begin full-scale invasion of China in 1937. Because of this, hold on, let me go back. Sorry. Because of this invasion in 1937, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong's forces unite to fight off the Japanese. So at this point, the Chinese put their civil war on hold to fight the Japanese as a united front. And even that is not enough to fight off the Japanese. Okay, Italy. Shift our gear a little bit here. Mussolini is in charge of Italy. We talked about him in the last chapter. He is a fascist. They are very anti-communist. They think communism is wrong, but they are very much like communist in that they are a socialistic form of government. Italy wants to expand its borders. It wants to reestablish the old Roman Empire and the glory that was Italy. So they do so by first conquering the African country of Ethiopia. They had tried to conquer Ethiopia in the 1800s and had been unsuccessful. And because of that, they kind of wanted a little bit of revenge, I think. So they went back in with tanks and machine guns and the whole 9 yards against Ethiopia, who was fighting with bows and arrows. They conquered Ethiopia very easily. It's a country very rich in natural resources, so Italy was after that. When they did that, though, the rest of the world complained, hey, look, Italy, you can't do that. So the League of Nations, remember, established after World War I, decides to invoke sanctions, economic sanctions against Italy. Now, when they did this, economic sanctions basically tell the rest of the world, you can't sell these products to Italy. The problem is when they invoked those economic sanctions against Italy, there was nobody preventing them from selling oil to Italy, which is the one key thing Italy had to have to continue its war efforts. Its tanks, its government, it all ran on oil, okay? So if they had invoked economic sanctions saying nobody could sell oil to Italy, Italy might have had to stop. But as it was, they did not. Okay, last point I want to make today is just we're going to touch on a little bit of Germany and we'll finish Germany tomorrow, okay? Germany is in the same boat that Italy is. They have a fascist government led by Adolf Hitler. Of course, this is a Nazi government. He wants to establish what he calls the Third Reich or the Third Empire in Germany. And he wants Germans to have more Lebensraum. Well, what is Lebensraum? That's an odd word. And if you have that written in your notes, you need to put a definition beside it. It means living space. He wanted the Germans to have more living space. He wanted them to be able to spread out and to be able to enjoy the freedoms in their country. They didn't have any freedoms, but anyway. Um, Now, remember, the League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles had put a lot of sanctions on Germany. We're going to get more into this tomorrow. But Hitler begins by, if he wants to give Germans more living space, he has to give them more, he has to conquer more lands. And in order to do that, he's got to rearm Germany. He's got to give them their weapons back. That all those weapons have been taken away as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler is going to ignore these agreements and start rearming the Germans. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to send troops into the Rhineland. Now, the Rhineland is kind of like a buffer zone between Germany in the north and France in the south. They're kind of, I'm looking at it my way, but your way would be the opposite. So France is to the west of Germany, and the Rhineland is in between the two. And Hitler sends troops into the Rhineland in order to take over this space that they'd been told to stay out of. It was part of the Treaty of Versailles that they were not to invade the Rhineland. And he did it anyway. And that finishes what we're going to cover for today. We will pick up here tomorrow with Hitler's further advance throughout Europe and what is it finally going to take for us to go to war against him and stop him. Make sure you've taken notes before you take the quiz, and I will see you again tomorrow.